Hi there, folks. Dan Fritter again with Calibre Magazine and another episode of Gunvote. It's Thursday, September 2nd, and I believe 18 days remain in the 44th election campaign here in our fair land. Not a huge amount of news on the polls overnight. Still sitting around 68 to 70% conservatives nationally. Looking more and more sort of stabilizing around a conservative minority position, with big gains still looking in the Atlantic provinces, Ontario and BC, with the CPC actually potentially losing seats in the Prairies and Alberta, which would make their vote a little bit more efficient, which we discussed yesterday for those of you that are wondering what vote efficiency is. Go back and watch yesterday's episode. I'm here with a different Phil today. Yesterday with Phil Chow, the last couple episodes, Phil ODEL of ODEL Engineering Limited, which I'll tell you a little story with that. Is the first time I tested a gun from ODEL Engineering, it took me seriously about 4 months to realize that ODEL Engineering Limited, ODEL, is also Phil ODEL's last name, ODELL, which is all the OCD you need to know about Phil ODEL. Phil, how's it going?
It's going well. How's things out west, Dan? It's exciting here in Ontario.
Yeah. We've Kelowna is COVID hotspot of the province. We've got the most cases out of everyone, and everything almost burned down about a month ago. So I guess it was just the world trying to take the cleanse by fire approach to the region. I don't know, but thankfully we've had a few days of rain, so the smoke's abated and it's a little bit better now. But certainly is exciting, that's for sure. I wanted to chat because we're going to dive right in a little bit different than yesterday. Again, trying to keep these down to the 15-20 minute mark. For those that don't know, ODEL Engineering Limited is a firearms distributor. So they bring guns in. You guys don't work with consumers. You bring guns into the country and you sell them to retailers, and you service them, warranty, that kind of thing. You act as the manufacturer's representatives for obviously your Canuck line of shotguns. People probably also know from your Bergara bolt action rifles, Canuck handguns, that kind of stuff. Yesterday's news around the magazine limitations. So for those that missed it, the Liberal Party campaign policy announcements were made yesterday and around firearms, besides the OIC becoming a mandatory buyback program or deactivation. So your guns will be ruined either way. They also want to limit all long arm magazines to 5 rounds. It doesn't matter if it's manually actuated, rimfire, shotgun, you name it. So and they want to limit it to 5 rounds of the smallest ammunition that could hold. So the way I've been trying to explain it is a 40 caliber Beretta 96 magazine functions in a Beretta 92 that is 9mm. A lot of IPSC guys used to shoot Beretta 96 mags because you get, I think it was 12 rounds of 9mm into the 96 mag. So what they'll do if the Liberals win is they'll limit those 96 mags to 5 rounds of 9mm. So your 40 Smith & Wesson Beretta will only hold 4 rounds because those magazines also work in the Beretta CX4 long arm, which is, I think, a pretty good explanation of exactly how clear those regulations make it. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about today is more on the distributor side. I've tried to tell people these changes are going to affect you even if you don't own the guns that are affected by them, because it'll drive up prices and it'll change the nature of our business. And, let's say, we've talked, let's say you've got 3,000 shotguns sitting in a pallet in your distribution center, and Trudeau wins, and suddenly this is now a policy, and much like the OIC, there's probably going to be no working with industry. They'll just make it an edict. If they tell you you've got to limit all your guns to 5 rounds permanently, like, what do you do? Do you have to take those 3,000 guns to a guns? Like, what, how much would that cost? How much would it add? Like, if you've got a gun that was maybe a $500 pump action shotgun intended for sort of a value centric hunter, and suddenly you've got to go to a gunsmith and get the magazine tubes crimped to 5 rounds of mini shells, so like 3 rounds of 2 3/4. What's that add? Like, what would you be looking at? What are you talking about? Are we going to go to like a $700 gun here? Like, what would that mean for you guys on the industry side?
Well, first and foremost, it relates to the actual operating mechanism of the gun and how the gun is designed. But yeah, I mean, simply your tubular pump action shotgun is probably the simplest. And yes, you would be talking about probably some form of crimping of the magazine tube. There'd be a discussion of what is the shortest round that it's chambered for. You mentioned mini shells. Not everything will work with mini shells. So just because theoretically it could work with mini shells, but practically it actually doesn't. Do we have an issue? I mean, I think without too much question, anybody's going to say a 3.5-inch gun will cycle a 2 3/4-inch shell. So that'll work on the carrier. So, I mean, best case, you're looking at something that would need to be shortened fairly significantly. Your 3 or 4 round or 5 round 3.5-inch gun is going to be lucky to have 2 rounds in it at the end of the day. The operating mechanism becomes a bit of an issue. You can take that tubular magazine question and now apply it to a tubular magazine 22 that currently takes, it feeds 22 shorts. Okay, how many 22 shorts? How do you ensure that your tubular 22 magazine, because we all know, in the firearms industry, that tubular magazine is functioned by a sleeved spring that slips into the front and locks into place. And it's a separate part because you feed the rounds down the tube from the front. So you literally remove what is effectively the follower, which defines your capacity, out of the gun in order to load the firearm. So you've got a number of areas which are going to be tricky. Cost, absolutely. Anything you do that increases the uniqueness of a firearm to a manufacturer. And to date, a lot of things we've been able to do on that, we do here in Canada. We will add magazine plugs to comply with the Migratory Bird Act. We will do different magazine capacities. Some of our handguns may originally be designed for 12, 15, 17 rounds. We can have manufactured separate 10-round magazines, which meet the requirements. More and more uniqueness always adds costs. And again, depending on the exact mechanism, depending on the level of finish. I mean, the more expensive a gun, probably that change is going to add even more. $100, I mean, you're kind of picking a number literally out of the air on this, Dan. But by the time you talk about either a manufacturer or a distributor like us does the work, you have the markup to dealer, the markup to retail. I mean, we're fortunate in our organization. We're pretty flat. I mean, we're manufacturer, distributor, dealer. Number of these companies, there's intermediates. So, they're maybe 4 levels. And every time you add $1 at manufacturing, it's probably $3 at retail. So it's
would you expect to see
a big difference?
Would you expect to see, and we got to we'll get into another subject because I know we want to talk about the museum and collector guns and some of the older stuff, Lee Enfields and M1s, but on the industry, like we think about, going to SHOT Show and distributors courting manufacturers, trying to convince manufacturers to effectively, and I've seen this, invest in the Canadian market, because you go to a manufacturer and you say, hey, we'd like you to build a handgun for Canada, but it's a 4-inch barrel. We need you to add basically a 1/4 inch to it. Can you do that? And they look at their fixturing costs and everything else. You try and make the case that you can sell enough guns to make it worthwhile. Would you think that something like this, I mean, especially because what you reference, it sounds like it's going to mess with quite a lot of stuff around operating systems and functionality and all that.
Yeah.
Would you expect to see a reduction? I guess we both are going to know, we'd expect to see a reduction in the number of manufacturers investing in new products in this market. How bad of a reduction do you think you'd see? Like, if you imagine going to SHOT Show in a post-Trudeau world where you got to go down and say, okay, we're limited to 5 rounds in pretty much everything in this wonky world of whatever caliber might work.
I expect
you think 30%?
Well, I expect you're going to go, here's our new over and under. It's 30. No, I would suspect half our manufacturers will go away because they're all selling elsewhere currently, and the industry worldwide is wagged by the U.S. commercial market, and the U.S. commercial market right now is taking anything that'll go bang. So the manufacturers we deal with, and I'm not be it Turkey, Germany, Japan, Spain, wherever. They're just looking at what can sell in there and how much can they get into the U.S. right now. So it has been, and I'm not going to exaggerate, it's been 10 years of us convincing manufacturers to work with Canada. Some took and God love him, Chris Killoy at Ruger. He said, all our standard size handguns are going to be 4 1/4 inches or more. Boom. A 4-inch gun became a 4 1/4 inch gun at Ruger. It was an executive edict from the president's office. That was unusual. And worldwide, he's the only one I know that did that. And that's because Chris had a relationship with Canada, and so did Ruger. But now, I fully expect with this foolishness, because you're not just talking something simple, and barrel length is something that in most firearms, you can make an accommodation, particularly handguns. Now, when you're talking about messing with mechanisms, if 1 in 5 stick with you on a new design, that they would customize a version of a new design for Canada. Yeah, you're kind of probably in that range, because it's going to be difficult.
So if we're looking at losing 50% of all new designs, if we're realistically looking at, even something as simple as and I'm not going to throw a brand on here because I'll end up getting an email from a rep saying, why'd you bring me up? But brand X bolt action rifle, it might come with a variety of magazine options for the model lineup. They'll make the blind mag basic budget version. They'll make a hinged floor plate and a detachable version. We might see a world where even those guns don't start coming in. What about, this is the next subject, old guns. You're also involved with museums and saving a lot of the full auto stuff and prohibs. Anyone that's read the magazine knows my preference is more towards the stuff like my K31 and my Mausers and the Enfields and Ross rifles and M1 Garands and surplus type stuff. We had an interesting conversation before I hit the record button about things like the M1 Garand and the SKS, where the magazine is an integral component of the gun to a degree, and in the SKS's case, an integral component of the gun that can be removed and replaced. When you consider what a government says about permanently modified, and you think about some of these older guns, what happens? What's that? With the M1 Garand, like you brought up the N block clip. Earlier, how does that work?
Well, this is one of those things. Until you actually get into it and you see what these guys really are talking about, and God help us, Specialized Firearms Support Services will be all over this. And that's going to be a mess, because now you've got opinions going on, of what's permanent. And that's, that's the second discussion right after variant, which is totally and completely undefined in any legal sense. You mentioned, the SKS. Okay. Well, the SKS takes everything from an AK mag, if you do a D, in any capacity, because it's detachable, to its standard 10-round flip open, more or less a floor plate, which we've modified to 5. Okay, well, what's considered an acceptable modification? Because that part can be removed from the SKS. Another one is your Garand. The Garand takes an 8-round en bloc clip. Okay, well, it has a finger inside of the gun, which forces the rounds up as they empty out of the en bloc clip. So you can get to as few as a 2-round en bloc clip, and it will work. But where's your discussion on excluding? You say, okay, well, you can only have 5-round en bloc clips. Okay, but what do you do to the gun to make sure it doesn't take an 8-round en bloc clip? Is that going to be part of it? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We don't know. The real crime in all of this is going to be those guns you mentioned, the K31s, the Enfields. You're sitting there with a, pick your poison. And there's a lot of number 4Ts in the country. There's probably a few thousand of them. These are expensive guns. These are highly, highly valued collectors' firearms. And I mean,
historical artifacts, truly, really.
For a basic one. You know, you've got a Canadian gun. Heaven forbid you've got a Canadian gun with an Lyman Alaskan on it. I mean, I haven't even seen one of those things transfer in a while. Last one I saw was over $12,000 before buyer's premium and tax. So, you know, very, very expensive guns. You're now going to drill holes in these things. Because they say, well, it's a detachable magazine. Well, yes, but it's serialized to the firearm. And part of the value in these historical items is how they were marked and how they were put together. And so you take something like that, you're now going to drill a hole, probably in an area that might have a sensitive marking to a collector. It's a huge, huge, huge impact on the value of your gun. And then you get into, you mentioned the K31 as personal favorite of yours. There's thousands of those things around the country. What are they going to do with those? 1886s. There's piles. And that doesn't even include the Kropatchiks, which again are a tubular magazine gun. How do we go about those? I mean, there's all kinds of these things, and it's going to be a cottage industry at some point. What are they going to do in terms of an allowable period to come into compliance? Because that's another issue. I mean, you know, even if you've got an answer, here's how this has to be done. There's an implementation, and some individuals, you know, may have 1, 2, 5. There's other individuals that, you know, may have dozens of these firearms that they need to get done. So you're also putting a fairly onerous cost on these owners for no good reason. And yeah, it's going to be a treat.
And to think about. We'll have to wrap it up now as we're approaching our 20-minute mark. But to think about,
we can always do this again, man. You know, you've got.
We'll have you back. I mean, so these Gunvote episodes are the short ones, but I'm planning on having some longer, full format, couple-hour discussions, and we'll definitely have you back for one of those ASAP. Those will be following, for those listening and wondering, those will be following these Gunvote episodes pretty much immediately. We're recording them concurrently, so that on the 20th, when the Gunvote coverage wraps up and the daily pace can finally be relaxed and I can sleep in for a change. We'll start rolling into some pre-recorded interviews with folks like yourself. But more back to the point here, you know, the notion of thinking about a Trudeau government leaving it an indelible and permanent mark on guns like number 4Ts, there's something just offensive about that. Like the very notion is abhorrent to me. Those are historical artifacts that people, I think to not put too fine of a point on it, people died fighting with those things. I was going to say, people died for our rights, and that was one of them. And you're putting too fine a point on it. That is literally the fight that we're in. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, talking to the generation that fought that war, and I mean, just imagine having that conversation with some guy about welding up a number 4. I can't even think about it, but we have to wrap it up there. I'll say thank you so much, Phil, for your time this morning. It's awesome talking with you as always. Hopefully, again, that gets some people. You realize now this is going to impact absolutely everyone.
Oh, totally.
Because if you think
those guys out there, you're absolutely right, and I hope that gets through because it's important. Every firearms owner is, you know, your hobby's on the block.
Well, from what it sounds like from this conversation, we're going to lose half of the new stuff that every retailer sells, that guys buy, that is literally the lifeblood of this industry and this community, and keeping our gun clubs open, allowing retailers to have money to donate to competitions and run stuff. And it also sounds like we're going to lose most of our surplus as well. So I'm not sure what's left. So if this doesn't get you motivated to potentially call up, start volunteering with your conservative EDA in the area, or keeping if you don't want to get that involved, keep a really close eye on your local riding and vote for whomever is most likely to defeat a liberal in your area. If you are lucky enough, like I am, to live in an area where you have a conservative, vote that way. As we've discussed in the past, if it looks like it's an NDP guy that's most likely to beat a liberal incumbent, vote for the NDP, because the absolute thing we need to do is keep the liberals out of government at this point. So again, that's 18 days left. So make sure you guys get off your butts and do something. It's Thursday, September 2nd. I will see you guys tomorrow, Friday, for the last episode of Gunvote for the week. We'll be taking the weekend and Labor Day off, but I will see you guys tomorrow. Happy Thursday.